What makes a guy attractive to women? If you have a look at a bunch of YouTube videos, you'll likely find two polarized results. You find the group of kind of PUA guys saying, look, if you just use this magic line, you say this magic thing, you wear this magic fairy dust scent of masculinity, and suddenly women are going to be falling at your feet. On the other side of the internet, you've got the more black pill side of things, which says that there is nothing you can do. You're completely a victim of your genetics, a victim of fate, and there's no point putting in any effort unless fate has smiled on you in the looks department. And I got pretty tired of a lot of the misinformation that I was seeing going around, because the reality is they are both mostly wrong. The reality lies somewhere more in the middle. There is quite a bit we can do. And in fact, one of the biggest indicators of interest, one of the biggest things that women find attractive in men is something that we largely have a lot of control over. So I've poured through a lot of scientific research that is just peer-reviewed studies to bring to you what I'm going to share with you today. So I'm going to start with number one, which is the immutable factors, the things we cannot change, the genetic predispositions that we have. So the first thing is what's called facial symmetry. You've probably all heard of that before. Any man or woman with strong facial symmetry is generally regarded as attractive. Now, makes sense because a lot of genetic conditions, a lot of health issues, a lot of diseases can upset the balance of left and right sides of our face. So it becomes a very easy indicator for good genetics. The second thing shouldn't be a surprise, is height. Height is another genetic indicator of good health. So why is it a genetic indicator of good health? If you look back a few hundred years, what you saw, of course, were people were on average far shorter. You know, famously, Napoleon wasn't particularly short at all. He was just short by today's standards. If you can go and visit castles in France, you'll see like a lot of the doorways are even too low for me at 5'8". That was because of poor nutrition. So if someone who is tall was far likely to have a much better nutrition, that means much better access to resources allowed them to become taller. So height kind of makes sense. And the third one is an interesting one, which gets talked a lot about in the looks marketing department, but is a little controversial, which is facial masculinity. So things like your cheekbones, your jawline, facial hair, these kind of, the brow ridge, the stuff that gets impacted by testosterone. And the argument is, well, in the womb and as we grow up through adolescence, if we can have a lot of testosterone and stay alive, because testosterone tends to deplete our immune response. So if you could stay alive back in the olden days and still have a high testosterone level, it meant you had really good genetics, really good, at least health, resistance to disease and sickness. So these were indicators that are immutable, that can't change. What's interesting when it comes to facial masculinity is that there's actually increasingly large amounts of research that are throwing it into doubt. Because what we're seeing now is a lot of studies are showing a trend towards neutral or even slightly feminized male faces, which suggests that there's a lot of societal impacts. In other words, our culture can impact dramatically whether we want masculinized or feminized faces. Now, these features are immutable. And I don't want to stick on them too long because everyone's heard these. But what I do want to say on height, I've never particularly worried myself about my height. I'm 5'8", and I know that it would be better if I was over 6 foot, but I've never felt like it worked against me. But increasing in the last 5 years, I've noticed a lot of guys really concerned about their heights, saying that there's no point trying to meet women unless they're over 6 foot. I want to point out that when you look at the data, the height is a preference. And I think you could really compare men's height a little bit with breast size in women. That is, most guys, if they were asked if all else was being equal, they would enjoy women with larger breast size. A woman growing up would see endlessly men talking about girls' boobs, like, oh, big boobs, we like bigger boobs. We like when they look at porn with women with big boobs, right? Something that women would see constantly. Feeling, well, if a woman doesn't have big boobs, then guys just won't be interested. But as guys, we know that, okay, boobs can be a preference, not for all, but for many guys, probably more than average. And yet it's not the only requirement. Or a lot of guys would happily date women with smaller chest size if she's got other great features. And for women, it's largely kind of like this with height as well. So, it's a preference. And again, all else being equal, let's pick the taller guy over the shorter guy. But if all else isn't equal, the height isn't the be all and end all. And that's what the data kind of shows. So don't get too down about it. The height doesn't stop you from dating. It can get you better results and it would be ideal. But Nothing is ideal in life, so I don't want to hang up on that. So the second thing I want to talk about is the things that we can change. In fact, the biggest indicators of physical attractiveness. I'm not going to talk about personality stuff yet. So what's interesting, there's a very large landmark study that was done on what do women find the most attractive sexually, physically in men, and it was the chest to waist, the waist to chest ratio, which is, the inverted V is the waist narrow, is the chest broad. And this accounted for 56% of what women considered attractive physically in a guy. This is big. It's important because there is some genetic component here, but largely we also have a good degree of control over this through both diet and exercise. So most men can build some muscle and most men can lose some fat around the waist, right? This means that we can have a big impact on the critical factor that women find attractive. Now, there are a few other things that are mentioned around looks that have a big impact on women that are generally appreciated by men. So these are also indicators of health and contribute greatly to attractiveness. Skin condition, so how well you take care of your skin, your teeth, and your smells. These are the three things that I know guys will often, generally, most guys brush their teeth every day, but to having a really good skincare, a really good teeth routine, and also how you style yourself and groom yourself. When we look at how men perform in events like speed dating, how men perform in dating in real life, before and after we change how they present it, their clothing, their styling, their hair, their grooming, their skin, their teeth. When we work on those things and we do this in a controlled environment, we see a large amount of attractiveness leap, a jump in how women rate the guys. So what the science shows is that, yes, there is quite a bit you can do, quite a bit you do have control over, which is promising. All right, so having kind of given you a little bit of a ray of hope, I need to take some of it away. And I need to talk about the attractiveness threshold. And this is a pretty stable result across cultures, which is, it's best demonstrated when I explain an experiment that was done recently, where they took mothers and daughters, and they would take a bunch of photos of different men of varying attractivenesses and various bios, like about what he does for work, what his personality is like, and they would mix and match the photos and the bios, right, to randomly show women a random combination of looks and, other features about him. And what they found was that the women, the mothers or the daughters, when selecting for the daughters an ideal mate, there was an attractiveness threshold. They had to consider the guy to be moderately attractive. So not very attractive, not super attractive, just moderately attractive, before they would then begin to judge him on the other attributes. And so it's very clear. You have to meet a threshold attractiveness. If you're below that, there's almost nothing that you can do. So when you think about that, when you're approaching a woman in a bar, club, at a house party, wherever it is, she needs to find you basically attractive. And as we've talked about, there is a fair bit you can do to improve that. Some of it's genetic, some of it's not. But she needs to meet that. Now, that doesn't mean if you're below average in attractiveness that you're screwed. Now, I want to talk about this because too many guys go the black pill route and think that it's all bad. It's not all bad. It's not all good either, right? Genetics, it'd be lovely if we had perfect genetics. So there are two elements you have to keep in mind. One is that we clearly see from the data that outside of online dating, so online dating, we know that women tend to just focus on the most attractive guys, period. Outside of online dating, which is a very odd artificial environment, men and women, they tend to adjust their attractiveness curve based on how attractive they seem to be, or based on their market value, men and women. That means that women who are considered less attractive will generally have a dating threshold for men, which is lower than women who are very attractive. And we see there's a relatively strong correlation. The exception to this rule is for men and women when they have access to very attractive people. So if you are an unattractive man, but you're wealthy and famous, your attractiveness threshold will suddenly become quite high because you'll probably have access to a lot of very attractive women. Same thing goes for women. If women have access to a lot of men who are attractive, their dating threshold will shift. That's why in online dating, you see that for women. And you would see it for men too if the roles were reversed. In fact, you do see this in sugar dating, where men have the power and the balance of things are a little bit different. The second thing we then have to ask is, how much control do we have? So we know that there are some features that are quite genetic. Our symmetry, our height, things like this we can't change. There are some things we can change, like the hip to waist ratio and the waist to shoulder ratio, the grooming, the styling, all the other stuff. I couldn't find any studies that showed a direct comparison and sort of got percentages to compare. But I could look at comparative studies. So I could look at the percentage importance that something was for attractiveness from a woman's perspective. And I could look at how it was if it was something immutable like height. And I could look at how important it was when it was something like the body V shape. And what I can say is that things that are controllable consistently showed in peer-reviewed research a higher attractiveness score. In other words, they were more critical to how attractive a woman found a man. So there is a good degree of control that you will exert. So where does this take us when it comes to dating coaching? Well, I don't know if any of you have ever looked, but there's precious little research on dating coaching specifically. But there is research on two related areas. One is coaching in general. So life coaching, finance coaching, skills coaching, performance coaching in sport. There's also a lot of research on social skills training and its impact on social success. So that includes dating, but often includes other things like networking, making friends, success in the workplace, and so on. And what we do see is that coaching certainly has a positive impact on outcomes. So just coaching in general. But what's really important is the coaching style. And I think I should mention here, there's a big difference between the PUA, pickup artist kind of old school way of coaching, which is really focused on the one magical line you can say, this weekend boot camp idea of I'm going to teach you a few amazing things to say and women are going to fall at your feet. That is not, there's no coaching style that works that way, right? Finance coaching doesn't work. There's no magical investment strategy. There's no magical sports strategy that you can use to always be in the right state of mind to perform well, peak at sports. There's no magical way to build muscle that's going to build your muscle super quick. There's no other realm in which there's a quick fix. And the quick fix doesn't exist in dating either. That has to be said, because I think the pickup artist industry is really focused on this magical line, magical thing that you learn in a quick weekend. It's always a slow building of a skill set, not just an external skill set, what to do, what to say, how to tease those skills, but also the character building. So how do we deal with rejection and failure? How do we deal with our demons? How do we deal with past traumas that are getting in our way now? Coaching, good quality coaching of any kind, but especially dating coaching, needs to incorporate this, because I know as a coach, I've been doing this for 17 years, almost all men have some form of trauma connected to dating and relationships, sexuality, and women. And you have to deal with it. If you don't deal with it, you're going to continually struggle. So it's meant to be something that you work on slowly and improve. The research that we see on social skills clearly demonstrates that social skills do improve social outcomes. So if you're learning to network with people, if you're learning to banter or learning to tease and be playful with people socially, it helps. We know that learning small talk helps. We know that practicing CBT methods, that is gradual exposure to scary social environments like networking, like cold approaching women, we know that works when it's done in a professional way, in a professional manner. When I say that, I say this because many dating coaches also try to just force you. Just talk to the woman. They'll push until you're overwhelmed, you're overextended, and you gain more trauma rather than overcoming the approach anxiety. Something that a lot of guys do to themselves as well, because the general word in the community is just push yourself, don't be a pussy. It's a terrible mentality to have in any form of coaching, and especially when we're dealing with fear and trauma. So when the coaching is done well, we know from research that these strategies work. But if you're going to pick a coach, again, you really have to pay close attention. Dating coaching is unregulated. That's spoken about in multiple studies that I've seen. It's highly unregulated. There's a lot of pseudoscience involved in dating coaching, which is scary from the perspective of a student. I would say if you're looking for someone, look for a coach who focuses on you holistically as a man. He's not just going to teach you lines and routines. He's going to look at your traumas. He's going to look at how you deal with rejection and how you cope when things get difficult and things get hard, because these are the skills that will improve you over time. And again, the research shows it's not a quick fix. It's not a weekend thing. It's something where you're working at like 6 months, a year, you're slowly working on and improving yourself. And so really that's where the research took me. And it might not be surprising, but I think a lot of you need to hear it. If you want to have better dating odds with women, you need to be working on yourself completely, like working on your career, working on your health, and you don't have to have everything perfect. There's nothing in the research that suggests women need the perfect man. I know we've seen videos like that, or the women saying he's got to be over 6 foot, he's got to be making 6 figures, he's got to be. I know that we see it, but it's just not coming out in the research when we look at women in general out there in the wild. We just see that women have some basic standards that we want to try to meet, and we can do that through general self-improvement. And I think that's a positive message. I think that most men, we're not trying to become the perfect pickup artists, right? When it comes to your genetics, it's a little bit like in sport. I go to gym 5-6 days a week. I certainly can lift more than the average guy. I can certainly lift more than the average woman, but a professional powerlifting woman can still lift more than me. And a professional powerlifting guy can lift far more again. And those guys have a genetic advantage over me too, right? So if you're an average human being genetically and you train hard at a sport, you can perform better than someone who's genetically gifted and doesn't train. But if that person trains as well, their cap is higher. So the level you can get to is higher with good genetics. With bad genetics, you can still do okay, but it takes work and your cap is lower. That's not a nice thing to know or hear, but the reality is that, dating outcomes for someone who works on themselves are still quite healthy and still quite decent, but it's not a quick fix. And so, I hope I'm going to put a bunch of links in the comments below if you guys are going to want to follow up on what I've been talking about today. I'd love to hear your comments down below. And of course, if you've enjoyed today's video, it took me a while to put together, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to seeing you in my future videos.